Hello and welcome to my continuing series on domestic terrorism here in Toronto. I just want to get a couple of things taken care of right away. The last video I shot and posted on OCAP, I erroneously mentioned that the Queen's Park riot took place in 2001. In fact, it took place in 2000, but by the time I ended up realizing the error, everything was already edited. I did make a note of that in the comment section, but I just wanted to make that clear that, yeah, it actually took place in 2000. Moving forward. Well, as we know, we've had a fairly safe run in this city so far, or have we? We know that we haven't had a whole lot of reports of domestic terrorism here in Toronto. Most people, of course, are aware of the famous Toronto 18 who tried to blow up a whole bunch of different things. In fact, they were in the planning stages, but were caught probably days before any of this happened. However, there's a lot more that's happened in the city since then that you very likely have not heard about. Starting with one of the more recent events, many people may have heard of a recent acid attack somewhere in the north end of the city in the Lansdowne and the DuPont area, a donut shop. Pointing out, this is actually not the first acid attack that we've had, but that was the first one that was pretty much openly publicized. But it got publicized for about 2 or 3 days, and then all of a sudden it just stopped with no explanations, no nothing given. What if I told you that about 2 years ago, right on the TTC, we had one? That's right, we had one on the TTC. In fact, there was actually 2 attacks on the TTC here in Toronto. The first one was a dry run where somebody sprayed somebody with a liquid. It was completely harmless, but it was obviously an attempt to check response times and that sort of thing. But about a week or 2 later, the real thing happened. It was a one-off, and the Toronto Star very quickly put out a Twitter feed tweet indicating that there was a major incident on the TTC, but they never did elaborate on that. However, I did speak with a good friend of mine at the RCMP about 2 years ago when we learned that, in fact, that's exactly what it was, but it was being kept very quiet. Well, that's not the only thing that's being kept very quiet in the city. And when I say in this city, I'm not right now. I'm not just referring strictly to the city of Toronto proper, but the Greater Toronto area. A couple of years ago, I'd have to check my dates on that. And once I have that memorized, I'll actually put that in the comment section of this video. But what if I told you we had a much more serious attack than that here in the Greater Toronto area, up in the Richmond Hill area, and a bank. Some years ago, about 2, maybe 3 years ago now, some people will remember about York Regional Police officers having to shoot dead a person in a bank in Richmond Hill, which just so happened to be in a highly prestigious and very well-known Jewish area of the city that is frequented by people who are Orthodox Jewish. What happened over there at the bank that prompted this particular action? A Middle Eastern man walked into the bank wearing a vest, an explosives vest. Oh, he made demands, but he didn't want money. It was not a bank robbery. In fact, what it was he actually wanted to go in there and kill as many Jewish people as he could. This was never publicized ever as being anything more than a bank robbery gone wrong. But once you start digging and looking behind the scenes and in between events that took place surrounding that, and start looking at various news feeds, which I'm going to include all in this video, of course, you can see very clearly that that is exactly what it was. Again, No comments, no nothing, no admission by the police that this was in fact an act of terrorism, just like the acid attack was never publicized as an act of terrorism. So what gives? Why are we not being told about these acts that are taking place? And why are we allowing these acts that are taking place to be simply brushed off as quote-unquote random events by supposedly unstable people with mental health issues? Welcome back. So you saw the clips that I attached to the video so far with respect to the acid attacks and can't even think now, and what happened on the TTC subway. However, there's other things that did happen in the city that we need to give some thought as well to. Some people will, of course, remember this lady who decided to go on, at least try to go on a terrorist rampage at a local Canadian Tire store in Scarborough, where she was caught, made her great proclamations, that she's doing this in representation for her ISIS, and didn't hear much about her for a while. It was kept fairly quiet. Yeah, she got, I think, 7 years in prison for that. But this leads to another problem that we have here. Is not only, of course, do we have people like that, sympathizers and wannabe terrorists, and those who are basically sleepers, ready to act in a moment, but what we also have are media who are ready to jump in bed with these people and try and do anything they can to defend them and justify their actions. Not too long ago, of course, well, I guess about 2 years ago, the Toronto Star did exactly that when they said that they weren't going to call the Islamic State, or whatever it is called now, the Islamic State, or they were going to call it Daesh, which is a softening up of it. It doesn't make it sound as horrific as the organization really is. They felt that it didn't represent, the Islamic State rather, didn't represent Islam. Well, of course it does. But when you have left-wing media, and when you have people like Trudeau who are giving organizations like the Star hundreds of millions of dollars, naturally they're going to comply with whatever you want them to say to make sure that you get your fair share of the pie, basically, and that they will report what you want them to report and not what you don't want them to report. The whole don't want them to report, of course, is again why we don't hear about a lot of the stuff, or a lot of the things that we do hear about, if we do hear about them at all, is so watered down to make it look like such a remote, isolated incident that it's really not even worth mentioning or passing by, because after all, if the media doesn't report it, how important can it possibly be, right? Wrong. I'm going to continue this with the whole media bit in a little bit in another video, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of things here. We have, of course, media like, and I'm going to use the alternative media with organizations like Rabble, which is originally organized and run by a lady named Judy Rebick. Well, Judy Rebick, of course, doesn't have anything to do with it anymore. I think she might contribute to it. But the laughable part about Judy Rebick is, she's one of these so-called radical left-wing activists, which I guess she is. But she loves to go back all the time, say, well, way back in my day, Rebick, listen, let me tell you what happened back in your day. Back in your day, people had respect for law and order. People had respect for other people. People knew which bathrooms to use. People knew what Halloween costumes looked like. And none of this transgender fucking garbage that you hear. That was back in your day. Then, of course, we have other organizations, or people rather, than like Kevin, you know who I'm talking about, don't you? Yes, you do. Kevin Metcalf. Well, Kevin Metcalf, of course, is quite a piece of work. He's an anarchist, diehard, true blue in the face anarchist, Antifa. And he's going to tell you that it's all about peaceful this, peaceful that. But I've got some wonderful videos of him not so peaceful. I'm going to show you that later on. But for now, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. But I also wanted to make sure that I got in the fact that we have, like I said, the Canadian Tire terrorist. And you know something, you got to be careful, because this is one person who decided to go on a rampage in a store. But what happens next time you go in there or somewhere else and you have nutcases like her en masse trying to do the same thing? That's exactly what this is all about, to make sure that people become aware of this. The media is not going to report this to you. The media doesn't want you to know about this. They think that these ISIS guys and Islamic terrorists are all fine and dandy people. They love them. They think they're misunderstood. They're misguided. They call it mental illness. Yeah, they're mental, all right. But not in the kind of way that you and I think they are. But that's a whole other story for another video. Anyway, enjoy this one, guys, and we'll be back with the media. Talk to you later. Bye for now.